Well, we're back with a documentary recap. Ben George, along with Mike Noto, the most anticipated return to the podcast. Mike, we're glad to have you back.
It's good to be back, Ben, and I think we picked a good documentary here to get into to kick us back off.
Yeah, as we get ready for the Super Bowl, we're talking all about the Kelce documentary, what it was supposed to be, what it turned into, and how they got pretty lucky. It's coming up.
This is Distant Replay.
Welcome in. Glad to have you on the podcast. Hope you're listening on either wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. Glad to have you. Please hit subscribe. We appreciate that. A lot of support on the channel, and we're ramping it back up. Mike, quickly before we jump into this, I know we've had a lot of comments about you coming back onto the show. Every time I do a solo show, it's always, is Mike Noto still alive? Is he coming back? What's his deal? We need more Noto.
Well, I am still alive. I'm happy to report, and I am so excited to get back into everything here. I mean, our plan is to get back in the full swing, documentary reviews, true crime episodes, so I can't say how ecstatic I am to be back.
Yeah, we got a true crime show cooking as well, so that'll be coming out. Keep an eye out for it, but again, hit subscribe, especially on YouTube. Help us grow. We'd appreciate that support. But we picked this Kelce documentary. This thing has been kind of just hanging in Amazon for me, Mike, for a while. I always kind of see it, skip over it a little bit, but with the Super Bowl coming up, and obviously Travis Kelce being front and center of that one again, we decided to kind of roll with this. And I thought it worked out perfectly because it ties into the Super Bowl, obviously, but pretty amazing what this turned into. So if you aren't aware, if you haven't seen this yet, quickly to give you a little backstory, this was supposed to be kind of a look at his last year in the NFL. He thought about retirement, was strongly considering that to be his last year. So they said, hey, let's just do a documentary, follow you around, capture this final year. What it turned into, obviously, was him playing against his brother in the Super Bowl and everything that came along with that, and a new daughter that was born right around the time of the Super Bowl. So let's just start off, Mike. I don't know who planned this, but they got incredibly lucky the way this thing turned out.
And you see this a lot with documentaries. I remember I watched a documentary one time on the 2004 Red Sox where oftentimes the best parts of the documentary become things that the documentarians could have never planned for. And I don't think at the beginning, maybe it wasn't, who knows what Travis's role would have been in this documentary before how the season played out, but how it played out made him a central figure in the documentary, and of course Jason Kelce and his family, and it all came together perfectly.
It did, and you're talking about, I thought it was interesting what you said about this documentary, because I think in general, I know the Kelces. I didn't know much about Jason's story and just his life, and he's an incredibly personable character, and he's just full of life. He's exactly what an offensive lineman you would picture an offensive lineman, right? And I'm sure it would have been a fine documentary just following him in his final season, especially if the Eagles made a little bit of a run. But I mean, how many people would have truly been interested in watching a Kelce documentary of a center finishing up his final career in the NFL?
Especially when you're talking about a Jason Kelce, before last season. So we're talking about, the off season before their Super Bowl run. So there's no Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Their podcast, New Heights, is not really taken off yet. So you could have had a situation where you have a retiring center on a 7-10 team, and you're doing a documentary about him retiring. And if the podcast doesn't take off, it's like, well, now he's even lesser known before the documentary even gets released. Because I think that's when, outside of if you live in Philadelphia and you've been a fan of the team for the last decade, I think Jason Kelce in a big way came on people's radar through the podcast and through the Super Bowl run.
It did. So let's just kind of go back through this a little bit, Mike, and talk about what we liked, didn't like, and just kind of get into maybe what else could have been done differently or what else we might have liked to have seen from this documentary. Again, you can see it on Amazon Prime. It's up there. It's front and center. It's been kind of featured for a while now. But, they jump in kind of leading into that 2023 season. So off season, him thinking about it, knowing about, hey, this could be our last year, doing some radio appearances and stuff. I know I love our conversations because we come at it from two not completely different perspectives, but you being Northeast, me being Southeast, you being more pro, me being more college. To me, I didn't realize how loved Kelce was. I knew he was a fan favorite, right? But I mean, seeing some of these guys getting emotional around him, just fans and media personalities, like getting a little emotional talking about him possibly retiring. I didn't realize the level and how deeply ingrained he was into the Philadelphia community.
Yeah, the only reason I did is because I have friends from college that are from the greater Philadelphia area. And, it's everything the Philly fans like, right? Underdog story. A guy who won, the Eagles won a Super Bowl while he was there. 6th-round pick, had to earn everything he got, really embraced being a part of the city. And not to mention, he's a very good center, so that helps a lot. So just how that all came together, and he's become, they made it sound like, he's just become a fabric of that city. Married, we're going to get into it, but he married a woman who is from the Philadelphia area. I think that all kind of plays into it, why he's a hero there.
Let's talk about his wife, who had a pretty good role in this. And, she was, I think, someone that's easy to like as well. But the story of how they met was pretty incredible. Meeting on, number one, on Tinder, right? She thought he was a catfish. I mean, obviously, you come across an NFL player's profile on Tinder, you don't exactly think it's a real thing. You don't think the match is going to make a difference, especially when you're an Eagles fan, right? Like she was. So kind of blew her away. But she said, oh, let's just go and just see. It's either a catfish can make a great story, or it's him that's going to make a great story. Not only that, Mike, he fell asleep. He fell asleep at the bar the first time they were out together.
I think the reason why people gravitate towards Kylie Kelce and Jason Kelce is how relatable their story is, right? I mean, meeting someone online, very relatable these days. Not knowing what to expect when you meet them, but hey, look, I'm going to go meet him for the first time with a group of my friends. And if it doesn't work out, if it is a catfish, hey, at least it's a funny story. And then, you fast forward to, the first time you meet a girl that you met online, maybe you're a little bit nervous and you drink too much, and he takes it to the point where he falls asleep at the bar, and still makes a good enough impression where she wants to see him again. Very, very, very relatable, and I think is, again, a huge reason why these two have taken off in popularity because of this documentary and post as well.
Yeah, it was just a remarkable story, but she did give him a second chance, and obviously it worked out very well for them. The other part they kind of set up with is his family and the background and growing up with Travis, but also the parents and the sacrifices they made to give them the opportunity to play football. And it's just really the American dream kind of story, right, Mike? I mean, the people that you hear that have all the success and you watch these athletes get to this highest level, we see them in this moment and go, man, they got it great, right? What a life they have. They have all this money, live in a great house, play football for a living. But what you don't see oftentimes is what it takes to get there. And as parents, and I know you're kind of going through this, Mike, having daughters that play sports quite a bit, there's a lot of sacrifice, not only just with money, but also time. And we really get a true look at that, which really kind of sets up, what's to come later in this.
Yeah, and one thing that I thought his parents are Ed and Donna. And from what it made it sound like is if they had it their way, they probably wouldn't have been together living under the same roof when Travis and Jason were younger. But they realized, they're able to see that, in order for our kids to prosper the way we want them to prosper and to make things easier on ourselves as far as getting them where they needed to be, it was important for us to live under the same roof. And, that's a very, very selfless thing to do. And I think it's one of the first times I've heard of parents going to these lengths to keep a family together. I know it happens, but as far as being a central part of two athletes' stories, two athletes who are Hall of Fame athletes, what was very interesting to hear.
Well, and you hear less of this now, right? Because, let's be honest, more and more people in this generation and with the access to social media and this kind of instant gratification, very few people are willing to stay together, right? Just kind of move on and do what they want to. But it takes a lot to stay in this situation for the better of your kids. And it's great to see it all work out. It doesn't always become this Cinderella story, right? But this was pretty great to see. And it made you pull for them a lot more. And it really kind of ties you into and gives you that connection to Donna as this thing goes on. Because as we know, she becomes, a big part of the story later on.
She becomes a huge part of the story. They both get emotional talking about how awesome it was to see her be able to experience some of the fame that came her way during the Super Bowl run. And look, these two, Ed and Donna, they, up till present day, they're still together a lot at these sporting events. It's not like it stopped once the kids went to college. they were in it for the long haul to do what was best for their kids, and you have to admire that.
So as this kind of sets up the preseason and kind of getting into all that, you still focuses on retirement and kind of what he's thinking and what he's considering. You know, we don't give offensive linemen enough credit for how smart most of these guys are, because we look at them as big, dumb ogres, right? That's the perception and the stereotype. But many of these guys are so smart, so bright, and hard, and we know they're hardworking. They get down in the trenches. But hearing about some of the things that he was kind of dabbling in, real estate, pretty common. But a cow farm, the guy was considering being a cow farmer.
And I wonder how that got on his radar, because you know, he's from the greater Cleveland area. Looked like he was from a typical suburb. So I don't think it was like from his upbringing that he would have gotten involved in cow grazing or whatever it was. I had a hard time even understanding what it was. And he's made about, give or take, let's say $80 million in his career. So we're talking about like a sizable nest egg that he's going to have at his disposal when he retires. And the challenges of what to get involved in, what not to get involved in as far as business-wise goes, and where to dedicate his time and money, I thought was a very, very interesting subplot to this documentary, especially when at the beginning you saw the evolution happen where it was, I don't know what I'm going to do post-retirement, to by the end of the season, it's like, wow, I could just do this podcast. I don't think I have enough to do anything else. Mm-hmm. So you saw the growth of the podcast influencing how he felt playing football. And I thought that was interesting.
That was interesting. And it I'm sure was a big relief probably for maybe his wife at this point and some of his friends, because they pointed out that this is a guy that he's going to try so many different things and he might not be great at any of them. He just might just be stretched too thin and try to dabble in too much that it might, end up being an issue for him. But it doesn't really matter. But the other part of the setup to the final season is the relationship with Travis. And who knows how much the background would have played into this had the season not played out this way. But they talk about them playing together growing up and that angle and going to Cincinnati together. And the part that I thought was interesting that I didn't really know about was Jason really kind of taking his brother under his wing, standing up for him when Travis was messing around on Bourbon Street and got suspended for the game, and really was at a crossroads of his career, it sounded like, and could have easily gone the wrong direction had it not been for Jason being there and kind of vouching for him and keeping him on track.
Yeah, an interesting part of that, Ben, was the Cincinnati coach at that time, I believe, was Butch Jones. Yeah, I believe that's when Brian Kelly was on his way out and Butch Jones was on his way in. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was kind of in that transitional period.
Yeah, because they had the undefeated season when they had Kelly. Yep. And then Butch Jones, wants to throw the future best, probably the best tight end. It's going to go down as the best tight end in the history of football. And, of course, Butch Jones doesn't realize it and wants to just cast him aside. I thought that was funny. But anyway, I had heard that story before about Jason Kelce vouching for him when he was at Cincinnati. So that wasn't a surprise. But just to see the relationship between those two and how it sort of grew over the years. And one thing I always forget is that Jason's only 2 years older than Travis.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we forget Travis Kelce had a career in the NFL before Mahomes even came on the scene. And I think sometimes people don't realize how long into his career Travis Kelce is.
Yeah, I thought that's a good point. It doesn't feel like he's been around that long, but when you look back over the course of it and think back to that game and going back to that BCS era, and yeah, it was when Kelly had just left. Jeff Quinn was interim for the Cincinnati Bearcats for that Florida Sugar Bowl matchup, which they got blown out in that game as Urban was kind of finishing up his career as well down in Florida. So kind of an interesting crossroads there going back to that time period in college football. But takes us into the season, Mike, and this is kind of where they shift gears because I think you're going to begin to see where this is going. Eagles get off to a great start, undefeated start out of the gate, playing some great football, and then we start to kind of see the podcast introduced. And I'll be honest, I'm in the podcasting world, but there's so much out there to consume that it's hard to, unless you get put onto something. I'd never been aware of New Heights. I mean, I think I knew that they had a podcast, but it was never on my radar at all. But after kind of seeing this show kind of come together and then going and looking at it and researching it, I had no clue how big this show was.
I knew it became very popular, obviously, when Taylor Swift came into the equation. Now they're like the number one podcast, period, on, like, say, Apple Podcasts. But even before that, I had no idea that they were near the top of the charts in the sports podcast world. I consumed a lot of their clips on social media, but I never actually turned on an episode. But whenever you see the clips of them, even, pre when they became super popular, they're both very well spoken. They took the podcast. It seemed like they take the podcast seriously. And the biggest thing is, as you know, with the podcasting world, Ben, they were consistent with it.
Right.
They're there like the week of the Super Bowl before they play each other, recording a podcast. It seemed like it was on Radio Row with no one else there. So, they're very committed to it, it seems, which I think with these athlete podcasts is what gets what is where they miss it sometimes, is that the key is to stay consistent, because the athletes have an advantage that, let's say, me and you don't have, where people want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
Automatically, like right off the bat.
I think, too, they also obviously have good chemistry being brothers, and they have good personalities, but they also aren't just talking football, right? It's just talking life, and they kind of go back and forth. It's like you're sitting in the room with them more than listening to them get their opinions on sports and whatever else. And I think that's kind of what makes it really interesting. And we kind of see these conversations kind of building up throughout the year. As we know now, it's kind of angling towards this matchup, and we know how the finish will be. So I'm really kind of curious how they shifted gears and kind of where the season would have gone and what all the content would have been about later on that year. It had been just in retirement, right? And if they had just kind of finished the year, if it's still in the Super Bowl, but not against Travis, like how much more they would have gotten into the season itself, because it felt like you got a couple pieces of it, a couple games and learning about his injuries and having to deal with that off the field, balancing that with his family. But I felt like we kind of quickly got to the Super Bowl, which makes a lot of sense with the way it ended.
Yeah, I think if it hadn't been the Super Bowl run, I think it would have been more about the winding down of his career, more about his decision whether to retire or not. They spent time on it, obviously, after the Super Bowl, but there wasn't a ton of time spent on it. I think you would have saw more time spent on that, more time spent on what am I going to do after, and probably a little bit more time spent with him around his teammates, both current and former, because he has a unique thing going on, right, where a lot of the players he played at the beginning of his career, you see him playing cards with during the documentary for a little while, and then he obviously has his relationships with the guys that are still in the locker room.
I think that's what this documentary maybe missed the most for me, now that you point that out, is he's such a good locker room guy and such a motivational speaker. We saw that going into the Super Bowl. I thought that was one of the cooler moments, is watching him talk to his teammates, right before the Super Bowl, and talking about how they've worked their whole life for this moment and the sacrifice they've made, and how much he respects Jalen Hurts and has his quarterbacks back. And I thought if we could have gotten more kind of inside locker room and kind of seeing his interactions with that, I thought that would have been, I think it would have been better. I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. Now, I still enjoy the documentary overall, but I would have loved to see more of those in personal conversations, in meetings, in locker room, and some of that back and forth he had with his teammates, because I think that's a big part of who he is.
Huge part of who he is. And you like to hear more from Sirianni, who, as we know now, is a complete nutcase. So just more from him in like team meetings or whatever. And there's a lot of interesting personalities on that team that you're right, I would have liked to see. You got a little glimpse of it when they recorded that holiday song.
Yeah.
How they all kind of came together for that, which I had no idea about, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I agree. They missed they can only fit the documentary was an hour and 45 minutes, I believe, right?
Right.
So that, there's only so much they can get to without really, really stretching it out. But, the run, we've hit on it, but the run that both the Eagles and Chiefs went on last year sort of swallowed up almost the whole documentary.
Yeah. I wonder how much footage they had to cut out because of that, right? Maybe that was more the plan, was to have more of the locker room and intimate conversations and all that stuff, but you had to shift gears and focus your attention on the Super Bowl, which we got a lot of, and you kind of got behind the scenes on the relationship they had and kind of lead up, and him pulling for his brother and going back to that win over Cincinnati and kind of watching that all play out, because that was a great run just in general, those games. I mean, all those games were great. They were close. They were tight, great finishes in the Super Bowl, and just kind of watching how the family pulled for it was really cool. And then seeing his mom, become kind of the star of the show was a great way to tie it all back into kind of how they were raised, what's important to them, family being really a priority, I think, across the board for all the Kelces was really cool. But, anything from that Super Bowl run that stood out to you, Mike? Because for me, the biggest thing I thought was great was seeing the ticket conversation. $50,000 spent on Super Bowl tickets.
Again, very relatable.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about someone who's earned, like I said, up north of $50 million in his career. And, the fact that it still comes down to those day-to-day finances, even when you're at that level monetarily, is funny, because it's still $50,000, to go to the Super Bowl. And when they got to the Super Bowl, by the way, his wife was staying in a normal hotel room.
Right.
It's not like she was staying in like some suite or some house somewhere. And also with that Super Bowl run, you just forget those little plays during the Super Bowl runs that are so important. Mm-hmm. Like, I had just completely slipped my mind about, the hit late on Mahomes out of bounds that set up the field goal to win the game, you know? And I know you have Cincinnati fans that are close to you, so I know you haven't forgotten about it. And even with the Eagles, with the whole issue with Brock Purdy getting hurt and then Josh Johnson getting hurt, which they sort of glossed over. I don't think they wanted it to seem that the documentary was sort of saying, oh, wow, the game would have been different if the 49ers had their full complement of players. Mm-hmm. You notice how they kind of glossed over that. But just even that run, and then leading into the Super Bowl with the holding call and Bradbury, all those little things you just forget when in the moment they seem like such a big deal, But yeah, as far as his family during the Super Bowl run, his parents were great. Them watching Travis's game after Jason's was over, I thought was pretty cool to see, and how genuinely happy these two are for each other. It's that brotherly bond that, if playing in the Super Bowl isn't going to break it, nothing's going to break it.
Well, that was what was remarkable to me too, is watching the Super Bowl and the finish in that, and the way Jason handled it, because he's a uber competitor. We kind of see that. We get that. You kind of have to be at that level to be successful. But the way he kind of handled it, obviously very gracious with his brother, but then just kind of stuck around and kind of watched it. And then especially the way he handled when the game was winding down and he knew it was over. Oh, that's game, boys. And like not upset, not slamming his helmet down and not getting, super emotional, but just, it's a game, right? And you kind of get that, and he kind of has that perspective, it feels like. But pretty cool. He's easy to root for, I think. And I think most people probably do anyways. He's not in the news. He's a guy that goes and takes his shirt off, drinking beers at the ball game, and goes and hangs out with the Bills Mafia. So I think he's very relatable in that respect. But I think this documentary overall did make me more interested in him, number one, and respect kind of his career and kind of who he is as a family person as well.
You hit it on the head. For him to be that, at this point now, I think he has in his head when he's on that field after he just lost the Super Bowl, whether it was to his brother or not, that this is probably going to be his last game. I really think just from watching this, that's where his mind was. And for him to remain very collected, greet his family when they came on the field, consoling them really, as much as it was the other way around, them consoling him, he was consoling them. And, just standing there, soaking it all in, watching his brother, the scene where he goes back to the hotel room afterwards and is playing with his kids, late at night, right after the Super Bowl is done, sort of turning the page in that respect. You gained a lot of respect. Not that I didn't have respect for Jason Kelce, but the respect for him as a man grew 10 times more than as a football player. You already knew he was a good football player, but family man, father, good son, good brother. I mean, it's just great to see.
One other good moment, Mike, I forgot about. I got to mention he hadn't missed his daughter's birthday, which sucks, but part of the job, I guess. The conversation he was having with his wife, where like every answer was like, okay, sure, good. You're right. You just in that moment you knew exactly what he was feeling, and it was conversations we've probably all been on the other end of too, right?
Normally when I'm on the other side of that conversation, it's because I left my wife and kids to go like gamble at a horse track for a weekend. So when I call, there's not a lot of enthusiasm on the other side of the line. But it's good to know that was after he hosted Saturday Night Live with his brother.
Right.
So it's good to know that even guys who are hosting Saturday Night Live with their brother after they play in a Super Bowl are going through the same phone calls that I go through with my wife.
So good, so good. Well, what, Mike, would you have liked to see different? I thought overall it was good, but I'm curious kind of your thoughts on what you might have changed or what you might have wanted to see instead.
just selfishly, I realize this is not going to be good for like an audience that consumes documentaries. I would have loved to delve into more like, all right, what is he going to do when he retires, or the specifics on the podcast. Like, what changed to make him think like, oh, the podcast may be the thing that I want to do now. Like, delve a little bit into like not the numbers, but just like relatively like, how does what he's going to make with the podcast compare to what he would make if he came back for another football season, and sort of weighing that out. I know they're not going to get into that much detail on a documentary like that, but I just love to see like the sneak peek behind the scenes of that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was too. I think this could have easily been a multiple part documentary if they wanted to go that route. Still kind of a full length movie instead. But I do wonder, and I don't know if you've done any research on this, but I wonder if he had cameras fall on this last year, because I think it also would make a very good story. The on the field stuff completely different because of the success. They kind of fell short of where they thought they were going to be this year, even after making some big moves. Didn't obviously reach the Super Bowl again, but if we could have everything with the Taylor Swift stuff and kind of getting his perspective and how the family handles it, and then into retirement, and then watching this run to the Super Bowl and him living his life knowing that he's done with football, I really hope we get that, because that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, and I don't know if cameras have been following him and his family around, but yeah, the sequel might even be better than the original.
Yeah, it could be a lot of fun. So, again, you can watch this on Amazon Prime. It's there, available now. With the Super Bowl coming up, thought it would be a great time to jump back into this, and we will do more documentary reviews and recaps coming up. We appreciate the support. If you've listened this long, please hit subscribe. That's all we ask. It helps us out a lot. We appreciate wherever you listen, but especially on YouTube. But leave us a comment as well if you got any thoughts. We'll jump in there and mix it up in the comments as well moving forward. But that'll do it for this episode of Distant Replay. For Mike Noto, I'm Ben George. Take care.